Good evening. I'm Rachel Bronson, President and CEO of the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. Welcome to Conversations Before Midnight, our newly named signature annual event. It's wonderful to welcome you and the more than 300 others who are joining us from around the world tonight. I'm honored to be joined tonight by two former Bulletin executive directors, three former Science and Security Board chairs, a former editor-in-chief, and many current and former board members, staff members, and supporters. We have an extraordinary group of provocateurs with us tonight. Thank you to all of them. Thank you to all of you for helping honor the Bulletin's work and for leading what I know will be terrific conversations. A special shout out to our Science and Security Board members, Keynote Speaker Rose Gottemoeller, and our honoree Bob Rosner. Bob's wife Marcia is with us tonight, hosting a jam-packed virtual family table to honor Bob, and who is herself celebrating a birthday today. So happy birthday, Marcia, and thank you for sharing it with us. As we get started, I want to remind everyone that the world of virtual events can still be bumpy, notwithstanding our newly developed expertise. I want to share a few simple tips about Network Tables, our platform tonight, to make sure we all have the best experience. If you have any issues tonight, you can click on the help room on the lower left-hand corner of your screen, or just email us at help@thebulletin.org, and one of my colleagues is standing by to help you. When we move between sessions, you'll see a prompt, a pop-up on your screen. Always click the green Start Now button when you see it to move to the next session in our evening's activities. If you get disconnected or lost at any point, you can rejoin the evening from your original link. This brings you to our event homepage, and you'll need to click the Join button by the session happening at the time that you arrive, and then you'll be back with us live. If you're in a location where someone else is participating in an event like I am tonight, please make sure to close the door between you so that the sound doesn't carry during our small group sessions and lead to a debilitating echo. So now let's just dive right in. We live in difficult times. The nuclear arms control architecture that has kept us relatively safe for the past 50 years or so is in tatters. The US is about to embark on a 30-year, and by some estimations, $1.8 trillion nuclear modernization program. Recent news of Chinese advances in hypersonics and the Australia-UK-US pact in the Indo-Pacific are wake-up calls that inattention is breeding neither peace nor stability. COP26, the UN's global gathering on climate, comes at a moment when more of the world's population is directly experiencing the effects of changing climate, with the recognition that the necessary global response is too slow in coming. This situation prompted Prime Minister Boris Johnson's opening statement at COP, in which he noted that it was 1 minute to midnight on that doomsday clock. Although we got the time wrong, it's 100 seconds, not a minute to midnight. We share his alarm and are grateful that we could help him convey it. And advances in technology are making it easier to target individuals on a global scale, play on passions and prejudices, inflate anger, and turn everyone against their neighbors and community. Science is expected to advance more in the next 40 years than in all of human history. Happily, it has the potential to bring enormous gains and benefits, pulling people out of poverty, extending lifespans, altering patterns of energy consumption, and bringing cures to debilitating diseases. But if not properly attended to, it will also feed fears of marginalization and helplessness. If we don't manage the Pandora's box of modern science, as the Bulletin's founding editor called it, we don't create policy guardrails and maintain open spaces for serious discussions, if we don't take seriously the ethical questions surfaced by new developments in science and technology as we're doing tonight, scientific advancement will feed cynicism, distrust, and danger. Recognizing the important role that the Bulletin plays and must continue to play in this space, we are making significant investments, ones that will allow us to advocate for science and technology and the effective management of new advancements to keep humanity safe and secure. Here are a few highlights of what we're doing. We are adding capacity and restructuring our editorial team to deliver more high-quality journalism in new and innovative ways. We are raising support to undertake new investigative reports that surface questions such as, why does America need a new $100 billion nuclear weapon? And how vulnerable is America's energy infrastructure to hurricanes? A story coming soon from the Bulletin that is being produced in partnership with MIT Labs. As part of our commitment to the next generation, you'll be hearing later tonight from our 2021 Reeser Award recipient. Building on the successes of this program, we have introduced an editorial fellows program that is compensating a cohort of new columnists to develop new narratives about mis and disinformation, biosecurity, climate change, and nuclear risk. Our editorial fellows hail from Mumbai, Notre Dame, Howard, and Stanford universities, a meteorologist desk in Miami, and a group called Green Latinos. Many of our editorial fellows are with us tonight. In addition to this program, we have introduced a new board fellows program in partnership with Women of Color Advancing Peace and Security that provides new emerging leaders direct access to the Bulletin's boardroom, providing a unique experience in non-for-profit leadership that we hope will help rising stars to become even more effective leaders in the future. This year's fellows join us tonight from Washington, D.C. and Pakistan, where it's the middle of the night, and so we're so grateful for them joining. We have played an outsized role in the origins of COVID debate, moving the global public debate to consider seriously the possibility that COVID could have developed in a lab. While we don't know yet how COVID started, we do know that devastating lab leaks are more likely in the future, given the proliferation of high-end labs globally, and the lack of global regulation and verification, something we know quite a bit about. But we also know that naturally occurring viruses are also more likely in the future, given how fast our built environment is encroaching on the natural one, and because of the changing climate. We also know that viruses aren't the only bio threat in the offing. This year alone, nearly 4.5 million people will have visited the Bulletin's website by the end of 2021. Our audience is young and international and growing. Half of those who come to our website are under the age of 35, and about half come from outside the US. To engage with and cultivate new audiences in more places, our social media and digital outreach team is on fire, getting us onto Instagram, TikTok, adding data visualizations and infographics onto Twitter and Facebook, and connecting with platforms like LinkedIn and Flipchart. We can no longer wait for audiences to find us, but rather we must go out and find them, meet them on the platforms on which they engage when they are looking for us. And we must do so with the urgency that today's challenges demand. There is so much happening, but there's so much more we need to do. I hope you'll be moved by what you see and hear tonight and lend your support to our future success. Please consider texting to the number 41444, the simple message 100 seconds with no spaces, and you'll be prompted on how to contribute. Before closing, I want to take a moment to remember 4 great defenders of democracies who are grand supporters of the Bulletin and who are sadly no longer with us. Sissy Farrenhold was a Democratic titan in Texas politics and beyond. Ron Miller was a leader in the Chicago legal community and a major force for civil rights. Priscilla McMillan was a journalist, translator, author, and arms control historian. And Linda Rothstein, who passed away just last week, was a Bulletin leader for over 18 years and played a pivotal role in advancing the Bulletin's mission at the end of the Cold War. To honor each and the many others who have come before us, the Bulletin will keep moving forward, recognizing our past and transforming to meet future challenges in new and innovative ways. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote conversation. Joining us from our Science and Security Board is Sharon Squassoni, a research professor at the Institute for International Science and Technology Policy at the Elliott School of International Affairs at George Washington University. Sharon is the incoming co-chair of the Bulletin Science and Security Board, a position our honorary Bob Rosner is leaving after many years of incredible service. Sharon is joined in conversation by the Honorable Rose Gottemoeller, who was the first woman to serve as Deputy Secretary General of NATO, the highest position an American can hold by custom. While at NATO between 2016 and 19, she helped drive forward NATO's adaptation to new security challenges in Europe and in the fight against terrorism. Prior to NATO, she held positions in the United States federal government, including Assistant Secretary of State for Arms Control Verification and Compliance, where she was the chief negotiator of the new Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, the New START, and the with the Russian Federation. Currently, she is the Frank E. and Arthur W. Payne Distinguished Lecturer at Stanford University's Freeman-Spogli Institute for International Studies and its Center for International Security and Cooperation, better known as CSAC, and is the recipient of many, many prestigious honors and awards. Rose and Sharon, thank you to both of you for being with us tonight and serving as provocateurs this evening. But for now, over to you.
So it is truly a pleasure and an honor to have this opportunity to speak with Rose Gottemoeller, our keynote speaker this evening. Rose, I understand this is a special day also today because you were honored with the Douglas Dillon Award for Distinguished Book on Diplomacy from the American Academy of Diplomacy. Congratulations.
Yes, thank you very much, Sharon. It's been a thrilling day, and I'm so happy to join this community to wrap the day up. But no, it was a wonderful day with my colleagues at the American Academy of Diplomacy.
That's fantastic. And that is for her book called Negotiating the New START Treaty, which was published earlier this year. Before we dive into all the nitty-gritty substance, I wondered if I could share a personal note about the first time I met you, Rose. You probably do not remember this, but it was the late 1980s, a time when you can imagine the world of arms control and security policy was even more exclusive and very male-dominated than it is now. You were at the RAND Corporation, and I think I was at the Institute for Defense Analyses. You gave a talk on Russian security policy, and I was totally wowed by you from the moment you entered the room, your composure, your intellect, your eloquence. And actually, I remember you quoted Voltaire's Candide, and I was just blown away. But I will say that my respect and admiration for you has really only grown as your accomplishments quite literally have changed the world. The New START Treaty, you negotiated this more than 10 years ago at this point. And before we talk about its kind of strategic significance, I wonder if you could, as you did in your book, just give us a few highlights, from the process of negotiating the treaty. What were some of the highlights? What were some of the tricky parts?
Very good. And thanks for reminding me of that event, Sharon. It's so long ago, but the way I remember it is that the audience was very bemused by me quoting Voltaire's Candide. And so I'm glad I made an impression on at least one member of the audience, but thanks for that blast from the past. The book does recount a lot of experiences, but it also recounts a lot of lessons learned that I learned after a lot of reflection. I wrote the book after serving as Undersecretary of State for Arms Control, and then went on from there to be Deputy Secretary General of NATO. So I had a long period of reflection. And I think the key pieces from my perspective is it's all important to have the national security objectives of both sides defined clearly at a high level. And we had that because President Obama and President Medvedev met early on in April of 2009 and gave us very clear marching orders. So we knew the new treaty was to be about further reductions in strategic offensive forces. It was not going to limit missile defenses, and it needed to be completed fast. It needed to be completed by December of 2009 when START went out of force. At least that was our instruction to proceed. So we had a very clear and succinct objective in front of us. And oh, by the way, we needed to also go lower than the START levels. We needed to lower and reduce the number of delivery vehicles as well as deployed warheads. Now today, as we think about the situation, we have to bring China into it. And I assume that's one of the things you want to talk about today, but just to think ahead about and anticipate some of your questions, we do have a different environment today. There's no question about it. But I do think that there are lessons learned from New START that will serve us well, no matter how many players we have to wrestle with.
Right now, the U.S. is engaged in these strategic stability talks with Russia. The Trump administration had no luck in pulling in China. We don't have a long history. Well, we have no history with China really in negotiated settlements, except in a multilateral environment. How optimistic are you that we could forge a trilateral agreement, or is it something totally different?
My experience from the Obama administration gives me a fair amount of optimism. We've forgotten, but there were a number of venues that existed, including a high-level cabinet discussion across the government. It was an interagency thing. I remember very well sitting with Ernie Moniz, who was then Secretary of Energy, as he was talking about how to improve nuclear safety and security for fissile material related to, and radiological materials as well, but fissile material related to nuclear nuclear energy uses and nuclear fuel, of course, for nuclear power plants. So how to deal with nuclear safety and security in that realm. Of course, it's not military, but at the same time, we have some good experience from that era. I myself chaired a strategic security dialogue that talked about arms control and non-proliferation issues. And by the way, there was a very useful military to military strategic stability dialogue that brought over a bunch of really smart Chinese majors and lieutenant colonels and colonels, and they asked tough questions. The DOD used to always bring them across the river to meet with me as undersecretary, and boy, they asked tough questions. But I know, and I believe the Chinese have been thinking ahead about many of these issues. So it gets to how are we going to now improve our bilateral relationship so that we can return to some talks of the nature that we've had before. I don't see that we're breaking necessarily new ground here, even at a government to government level. And certainly in the track too, we've been continuing to have many, many discussions with the Chinese. Oh, is that your dog in the background?
That is my dog barking.
That's
Sorry
good. No, I love it. The one thing I will mention, which I found really interesting in recent track 2 discussions, is the Chinese are speaking very positively about the so-called SEND initiative of the Trump administration. This is the multilateral initiative, which is creating the environment for nuclear disarmament. That's what CEND stands for. And I've been interested that a number of Chinese scholars have spoken approvingly of it. So perhaps that's another venue to engage the Chinese. And finally, in the run-up to the NPT review conference, the P5 is going to be meeting together. And I see that now we've confirmed the NPT review conference for January 4. This is an early opportunity to engage the Chinese in preparations for the NPT review conference among the P5. And so I think there are a number of opportunities out there.
Do you think that there's a rush in, to nail down some Chinese capabilities? I mean, our nuclear stockpiles, our nuclear arsenals are at very different places in development, even though some people fear that China is in this sprint to parity. But do you see that, maybe we can make incremental progress in other areas and that we don't have to rush so much?
I do feel that there is a bit of a cycle of hysteric reaction going on. That's a bit strong words, but I do feel that there tends to be at the moment in our national discourse a trend line toward more nuclear weapon systems, more nuclear warheads. Let's build up, let's arms race, in other words. Mm-hmm. And frankly, I don't believe that that is necessary at all. We must remember the superiority of our current position, even as we can see China building up. We need to keep a sharp eye on developments there. There's no question about it. And technologically, and here's where I think we need to be putting extra attention. Technologically, they seem to be surging ahead with hypersonics, for example. And so we need to be highly alert to the necessity that we stay on the leading edge of technology as well. We cannot be left in the Chinese dust in terms of emerging and disruptive technology. So to me, that's the most important message. Let's stay focused on what we need to do to invest in high technology and emerging technologies that will, of course, inform military capability and capacity going forward and shape it as well. But I don't think we need to panic about what the Chinese are doing. We need to keep a sharp eye on it. And most importantly, we need to ask them what they're up to. So I think that that is the most important thing, referring back to our earlier set of questions, getting into some dialogues with China at multiple levels, and also depending on the second track and what experts are hearing there, but really ask them what they're up to. And if they're not willing to answer, then that in itself is a sign and a symbol that we're in for a rough ride. But if we can get into a good discussion with the Chinese and begin to sort through at least their views of what they think they're doing, that's very good. But also, of course, we need to depend on all other evidence, our intelligence sources, and what we can now see even with open source. And indeed, these recent discoveries about the silos in Northwest China were from open source satellite imagery. So we need to pay attention at all levels, but we don't need to panic.
Right. I suppose the good news is that we now have an administration that, or we've actually been pivoting toward the Indo-Pacific for quite a while. So we're putting together some of the infrastructure to enable kind of those dialogues across a wide range of issues. Can we pivot a little bit to your time as the Deputy Secretary General of NATO, which was from 2016 to 2019, a tough time in relations between Europe and Russia after Russia invaded Crimea. What do you, okay, this is a real question from out in left field. President Biden is, meeting with the G20. There's some talk of a European military force that France is very interested. What do you see the future of NATO at a time when there's a lot of, intra-alliance tension, the demise of the INF Treaty? What do you see that future? I know that's a huge question, but.
Well, I'll answer as I have been, and that is that NATO is a security fact on the ground in Europe and has been now for the past 70 years and has steadily built up its capability, but has also been very adaptable. It responded well, in my view, to the Russian invasion of Crimea, and then the pressure that the Russians have brought militarily against NATO borders in the Baltic states and Poland. So NATO has responded well. It's shown itself to be adaptable. Now it has some adaptation challenges ahead of it in terms, once again, of what new technology can do to affect security in Europe. NATO is constantly facing, these days, neither peace nor war, as we say, conflict in the gray zone with constant cyber attacks on NATO systems across the board, from high levels of command and control down to officers and even soldiers out in the field getting nasty text messages on their mobile phones. So there's a lot that NATO needs to do to respond in this new technological environment. But I've been very glad to see once again that NATO is paying attention to the security environment at a strategic level. They've seen the pivot to Asia coming since the Obama era, 2012, 2013, when Obama was announcing at that time the pivot to Asia. They've seen it happen. In a way, the invasion of Crimea interrupted that. But now they see that they have to take more responsibility for European defense. And that is at the core of President Macron's insistence that the EU needs to take more responsibility for European defense, needs to build up some independent capability and capacity. When I was DSG at NATO, along with Secretary General Stoltenberg, we always said, as long as the EU and NATO are working together and not at cross purposes, we can support each other in these efforts. And as long as EU military capacity and capability is made available for NATO missions, there should be no contradiction there. I continue to believe that. In the end of the day, NATO and possibly some EU independent capability on the military side, this is going to be the rear guard against Russia as significant shifts to facing off or facing up to what China is doing in the Indo-Pacific preoccupy the United States and countries in the Asia-Pacific region.
One final question, we're almost out of time here, but if you could sort of wave a magic wand and get one item of agreement between the US and Russia that would improve strategic stability or crisis stability, what would that be?
Well, I'm going to wave two magic wands,
okay.
One in Europe and one in Asia, because I do think my priority objective, as I think through the problems, is to really return to some restraints on intermediate range ground launched missile systems. And I think we have an opportunity to do that in both Europe and Asia. There's been some criticism of this so-called moratorium that Putin first announced back in January of 2019. What was very one-sided at that time. But in October of 2020, Putin offered exactly the missile we've been concerned about. He said he would take the 9M729 missile that was the violation of the INF Treaty, ground-launched cruise missile, take it out of Europe, and there would be monitoring and verification to ensure it's out of Europe. Now, frankly, it's interesting. He was at the ASEAN regional or the ASEAN summit meeting at the end of this past week. Oh, sorry about that. Putin was at the ASEAN summit meeting in late October, and he said, well, let's include the 9M729 in an Asian regional moratorium as well. To me, that's fascinating. So what does that mean?
Right.
I think we have an opportunity to work these issues both with Russia and with China.
Fantastic. Listen, I can't thank you enough. It's been wonderful to talk with you. And congratulations once again on your award. And we look forward to your, saving the world in another capacity.
Thank you so much, Sharon. It was really a pleasure to be with you.
Rose and Sharon, thank you. We are so fortunate to have your expertise with us this evening. Good evening, everyone. I'm Dave Kuhlman, Managing Partner at Axiom Consulting Partners and the incoming chair of the governing board at the Bulletin. I would like to thank all of you for attending tonight and joining me in supporting the extraordinary work of the Bulletin. We here at Axiom Consulting Partners are delighted to be a corporate sponsor of the Bulletin and a platinum sponsor of tonight's event. We partner with the Bulletin on some of its newest initiatives, such as the Editorial Fellows Program and sponsoring special briefings with globally recognized experts. I want to give special thanks to our institutional foundation supporters for their ongoing major support. Carnegie Corporation of New York, the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, Holt House Trust, and the Plowshares Fund. And many thanks to our gold and silver sponsors as well. I've been involved with the Bulletin for about 5 years now. I confess I got involved partly by chance. Call from a dear friend asking if I'd ever heard of the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. I confess I hadn't, even though my father was heavily involved in the nuclear industry. I got involved, and more importantly, I've stayed involved. I've given the Bulletin my time, my energy, and yes, money, because it plays a critical role in our future. The Bulletin exists to inform and equip people like you and me to be actors in the most critical issues of our time, how we address the Pandora's box of modern science. The Bulletin stands for fact-based debate, an explicit belief that armed with expertise, facts, and goodwill, we can make the world a safer place. I've stayed involved because of the people, many of whom are with us tonight, who are dedicated to turning back the doomsday clock. Some of the finest policy experts and scientists are with us in this cause. I'm astounded every day by what the remarkable people in this small but mighty organization accomplish. I've stayed involved because I know what the founders of the Bulletin knew, that it was we human beings who opened Pandora's box of modern science, and only we can protect us from all of its risks. I believe we have a responsibility, and the Bulletin equips each of us to play our part. Those are my reasons. You'll have yours. One way or the other, I hope you'll join us in the effort to turn back the hands of the doomsday clock. I'm pleased to share that a Bulletin governing board member has generously offered a $25,000 matching challenge gift. You can double your impact by making a gift tonight. So consider making a gift in honor of Bob Rosner, or the Bulletin's Next Generation program, editorial content support, Bulletin public programs, or even supporting our doomsday clock activities. Every gift received will be counted towards this matching challenge, and your gifts will make a difference. As you've heard others say, and I want to echo, the Bulletin's work has never been more important than it is today, and your support is key to all they do. The Bulletin raises 85% of its funding every year, and a big portion of that comes from tonight's event and donor giving between now and year end. With your support, the Bulletin can continue to deliver quality journalism through its website, newsletter, online magazine, and public programs. The research and information needed to reduce man-made threats to our existence. I hope you'll consider giving generously. With this in mind, I ask you to join me in making a gift to the Bulletin tonight. There are several ways to give. Your first option, text 100 seconds, that's 100 seconds, no spaces, to 41444 to receive a link to the secure portal that will be sent to your phone. That's 100 seconds to 41444. Second, you can go to the website at thebulletin.org/match and use their secure portal. And third, we will always accept mailed checks. Thank you. And now we are headed to the first of our two virtual table style conversations. In these small groups, you will be able to take yourself off mute, turn on your video, and speak with your fellow virtual table guests and engage with the fantastic experts who will be joining you shortly. You will be moved into your table shortly. If you have any issues, you can click on the help room on the left side of the screen and enjoy your discussions.